Hi everyone. So my name is Marie Drake, and I've actually given this talk quite a few times, and this is one of my favorite talks to give. But basically, today I'll be talking about how we can shift accessibility testing to the left. I can share the slides as well via the chat. So if you want to have a look at the slides after where I've added links to additional resources, then that might be useful. If you have any questions as well, so feel free to reach out to me via Twitter at mcruzdrake or via my personal blog at mariedrake.com. So there's a contact form there that you can use. So today, yeah, so I'll be talking about accessibility testing, and it's not something new. That's just come up, like a few years. So it's something that we've been trying to do for so many years now. Yet until now, the number of inaccessible websites that we see on a day-to-day basis, it's still very high. So in this talk, I want to briefly talk about accessibility, why we benefit from having an inclusive design, and I'll be sharing some accessibility testing misconceptions that people might have, and ways on how we can debunk those. And we'll then look at how can we actually shift accessibility testing to the left. So I'll give you some ideas on how to do that, and then at the end, I'll talk about some tools that can help you to get started if this is your first time doing accessibility testing. So if this is probably my color contrast of choice all throughout this talk, I wonder how, quick it would be before someone types in the chat and say that, oh, I'm going to leave this meetup. I can't really see properly. And this might be my last event as well. So you're in luck because that, won't be the case. I guess the first question that I have, and feel free to, type it in the Zoom chat, is if you've ever encountered the term Ali, or Ally, or A11Y. And there's some confusion on how to pronounce how to pronounce this, but basically the 11 in the middle just represents the letters in between A and Y. So whenever you see this abbreviation, just pronounce it as accessibility as well. So um, if you're new, to accessibility, you might confuse this with usability, but it's actually, a term that's under like usability. So accessibility simply is the practice of making a product that is accessible by people with disabilities. So this is important so that they can also equally, navigate or interact, with a product that is presented to them. And around 15% actually of the entire population has some form of disability. So that's about a billion people. So it's a very serious thing. Okay, so let's just have a look at some of the least accessible places that I saw online, and these weren't even the worst. I've seen others as well, but these were just a few ones that I wanted to share with you. So just imagine, let's say you need to go from place A to place B, and you, or a friend, let's just imagine that like someone is in a wheelchair. So if somebody sees this ramp, and it's this steep, they wouldn't really dare use this ramp. So unless you probably have a high adrenaline, or if you're on a skateboard, then yeah, probably you would dare to use these ramps. But from the image here, it's clearly not made for people who are like using wheelchairs. And one of the terms that I would like to talk about today, and this is actually one of the first common misconceptions that people might have, is they think that disabled people So they think that only disabled people benefits from accessibility, but actually, if we think about it, every one of us benefit from it, and this is referred to as the curve effect. So whenever you see a curve, it's actually been designed for people with disabilities, but actually, if you think about it, it benefits everyone because we also use it on a day-to-day basis. When my daughter was young and I have to, push her buggy with me, I would prefer to use the curve because it would just make it, like so much easier for me to, like travel about, if I'm with her. Another image as well, that's very powerful, that's very like powerful, is this difference between equality versus equity and inclusivity. So if you all just focus on the first image, what we have here is there is a baseball game, there is a fence separating the people, watching the game. So it's for their own protection as well, so they don't get hit. And if you see on the first image, not everyone can actually, watch the game properly unless they are tall enough. Now, this represents inequality on itself. However, in order to fix that, they actually gave everyone a box. They gave everyone, even if they don't need the box, just so that they can be referred to as, being equal. So with equality, everyone gets the same thing. So basically, some people will have heightened experience. So if you're tall, then you'll probably enjoy the game much better. Others will get along with the default experience, but as you can see, others won't. Um, the second image that we have, so it shows that some people who aren't tall enough, they can ask for extra boxes so they can finally watch the game. But this is actually seen as bad equity because now there has to be another person handing out additional boxes every time someone asks for it. And if we think about it from a business perspective, that's, like another, cost, because then we need to pay this person. And there needs to be like an extra effort to basically hand out boxes. Now, in order to not increase, the cost, why not make the fence see-through, like in the last image? So it still keeps people from, going into the field. So it still protects them. But as you can see, everyone can now watch the game without, anyone handing additional boxes. So the main point here is when we think about being inclusive right at the beginning, everyone benefits from it. So rather than seeing it as a cost overhead, if we're talking about in business terms here, it's now seen as a revenue generator because more people are now enjoying the game and they'll talk about it in a way that they have a better user experience. There's also wide array of disabilities. So it can be permanent, it can be temporary, it can be situational, and not all disabilities are visible. So this is why inclusive design really benefits for everyone, because if we think about it, we've all been in a situation where we have to, use accessible products. So for example, if you're a new parent where you need, to hold your baby on the other hand, and maybe you need to use your phone on the other, then you need to make sure that you can still, I guess, use, the same sort of like actions or the same sort of like touch as if you're using, two hands. I remember as well, so I had a temporary wrist pain before, which made it really difficult for me to, use my mouse. So I had to rely on using, ergonomic keyboard just to relieve the pain. And another example as well is, old age. So every one of us will experience like old age symptoms. So for example, we're gonna have, I guess, ages where we're gonna be hard in hearing, those kind of things. So it just makes sense to have a product that is also catered to, different types of like situations as well. So for people who are hard in hearing, a great example is, I guess, using closed captions. So captioning, it was created for people who are hard, in hearing, but it still benefits everyone, because if you're in a situation where, for example, you're in a bus or you're in a train and the environment is loud and you still want to watch the show that you're watching, then you can read the captions instead so that you can still follow along. Nowadays, mostly everything can be accessed online, and we rely on the internet basically to perform most of our tasks. So, especially, we had like the lockdowns, we basically relied so much with, the current like technology to be able to do our groceries, or, like even like pay our bills. So, this just puts, I guess, that higher or that bigger responsibility to businesses, that they need to be able to provide a feature to all of their users and make sure that it can be accessed by everyone. If you want more convincing as well, so let's say you're trying to convince someone as to why we need to prioritize accessibility, especially web accessibility. These are just some of the points that I can share. So first of all, accessible websites are easier to use. If for example you encounter a website that doesn't have clear instructions, there's a lot of like flashing animations, content that is quite hard to read, we tend to avoid these websites in the first place. So if you have a website that's developed, that's designed with accessibility in mind, then it's actually easier to use, which leads to an increased user satisfaction as well. The third point, so believe it or not, it also contributes to higher SEO ranking. So a perfect example that I can think of is, let's say you're working on a podcast, or you're like trying to listen to podcasts. Some podcasts, they have transcripts, some podcasts they don't. And what I found was, podcasts with transcripts, they are actually indexed much higher by Google, because the transcripts can be crawled and indexed easily, compared to without transcripts. The next point as well, so it's just safe to avoid like legal complications, and it's always best to check what the law is around accessibility, because it differs from one country to another. So best check what the regulation is in your country. But it's just best to avoid all this like lawsuits in the first place, because this will just cause headaches, and a lot of money will be wasted. And you're probably all familiar with the Domino's accessibility case, that has happened. So it's just really best to avoid it in the first place. It also boosts your company branding, so it's always good news, I guess, like for businesses, because whenever users have a positive experience, then it's so easy nowadays to share positive reviews. So yeah, it's just really good news for your company branding. It also encourages independence among all users. So if we think about it, we're actually encouraging and empowering, independence among like everyone. So they don't have to rely on to someone if they need to use something, because they can just do it themselves. And finally, it's very important. So it's just the most important thing to do. I guess, as people who work in the testing industry, we need to be like empathy. So we need to show empathy to our users, and advocate that their barriers can be like overcome. So I've talked all about the benefits, all the reasons why we need to be, doing accessibility testing. So my most important question is, we should all be doing it, right? You've definitely seen all the benefits, so everyone should be doing accessibility testing. But unfortunately, many websites are still inaccessible. And here in the UK, so even though I think it was 2018, they've actually released this like new regulations that basically says that public sector websites, should be accessible. You can see on the screenshots that I have here that many council websites, they are still preventing, millions of people with disability from accessing like important services and information that they need. And it's interesting because most of the issues that they found, so it relates to issues such as poor color contrast. They see issues related to like the layout. So for example, if you've got low vision, so if you need something that's like really zoom in, if you zoom a particular website to, let's say, 200% or more, then some of the elements will like stack up, and it won't, and you won't really be able to interact with it. So there's also like difficulty with using like screen readers because they haven't used the correct HTML tags, for example. So as you can see here, it's still very much a wider problem, and not a lot of companies are doing it. And I think this is because accessibility testing has always been done after a product has been delivered, or it's not even prioritized at all. And I've certainly been on multiple projects in the past where we didn't even consider doing accessibility testing, and it was only around like 3 to 4 years ago where I really learned about the importance of accessibility. But when I was starting out in my career and working on different projects, we didn't really talk about accessibility testing. And many teams, they still think that accessibility is a nice to have feature rather than having it embedded right at the beginning. And I think this is because we don't really talk about it a lot. So I feel like there is this miseducation about accessibility, which then leads to no consideration at all. And the main reason I say this is on my previous workplace, I remember sending out this, it's like a testing and quality, survey to wider teams. And the common feedback that I got around accessibility was that they don't know how to start accessibility testing. It's not just, or it's not just prioritized at all. And I think, by talking about it a lot, so that's why I like to give this talk as much as I can, is, we can normalize accessibility testing. And I hope that I can share to everyone that we can all make small changes. And basically, it's something, that we always have to consider every time we're working on different projects. So before I talk about how we can shift accessibility testing to the left, I just want to focus on some of the misconceptions that people might have around accessibility testing. And the first one is, people might say that designing and, developing and testing, for accessibility is time consuming and expensive. And I guess it's time consuming and expensive if you leave it right at the end. So it's quite similar with other testing activities. However, if you embed accessibility right at the beginning and get everyone's involvement, it's actually not. And to do this, there needs to be a change in mindset from the start. So you need to be able to try and influence, the right people in your team so that they can then influence the business, that accessibility can be seen as an added revenue instead. So you can try to influence the right people in a way that more users will actually be equivalent to more revenue for the business. The second myth as well is around whose responsibility is it to do accessibility testing. And a lot would say that, it's the tester's responsibility. And I guess this isn't entirely just about accessibility, but about quality in general. So it's not just your responsibility, it's also everyone else's, including developers in your team, designers, even your product owners. But This doesn't mean that we don't need accessibility experts or specialists, because in most cases we actually still need them to guide us and basically share their wealth of accessibility knowledge. But what I'm trying to say here is everyone should have that understanding that it's their responsibility to deliver an accessible product. So, an example that I can think of is, let's say you have a news website where you've got people from the technology team testing for accessibility. However, if the editorial team, if they don't add things like alternative text to images, then you're back in square one, because even if you're exerting all the effort, but then not everyone is aware of, let's say, the importance of alt text, then our users still won't be able to read a description of the images that they are seeing. So everyone needs to be educated, and they need to be aware about accessibility. The next myth is automated accessibility testing is enough. And this is just completely not true. So just because your automated tests are passing, this doesn't mean that your website is accessible at all. So it should always be accompanied with actual accessibility testing. And, if you can invite real users as well. There's actually a lot of great accessibility tools out there that can help you automate some of the basic issues. So I'll talk about that later. But actually, these tools only catch around 20 to 40% of issues. So let's say you've got a tool that basically checks if images have the alt text attribute. So your automated test can catch that, but then you still need to check if the alt text actually makes sense. So if it actually is relevant to the image that you're seeing, because your automated tool can pass it if the alt text just says like alt text or something random, but you still need to do that human check to see if the alt text actually makes sense. This shouldn't dissuade you though from using the automated tools, because they're valuable to run. They provide that early feedback. Just don't rely on them 100% of the time. The last one, so people have this misconception that it's hard to do, and this is somewhat true, but with everything it can be learned. um and I guess if I use my career as an example, so I started my career not really focusing much on accessibility, and I don't know why, but I always had this perception that it's only done by specialists, that it's actually hard, that you need dedicated like specialists for it. However, once I've educated myself and start to talk about accessibility a lot, start to connect with people who knows more about accessibility and trying to learn from them, it's actually not that hard. And if you don't have much experience with accessibility, you can always start with the basics. You can just play around, let's say, with your keyboard like for a day, and try to not use a mouse for navigating to your like favorite website, for example, and see if you can access it the same way. So you'll actually be surprised as to how many issues you can uncover if you're just using your keyboard. Oh, sorry, I forgot one more myth. So finally, just because you are compliant to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So if you're not familiar with the Web Content Guidelines, so this is the standard guideline that the World Wide Web Consortium has created. So this is what most companies are like trying to use if they want to achieve like a certain level. So just because you're compliant doesn't mean that your product is 100% accessible. And the main reason I say this is, different people who use your product, so if they have different disabilities, they will always try to use your product differently. And sometimes the rules that are listed or the guidelines that are added as part of the web content accessibility guidelines, it doesn't always represent the way they use your application. And it might be, updated, but it's gonna be updated in in like the next coming years. So it's a really great guideline. So I encourage, you to have a look at the guideline and see how you can bring that in into your like different projects, but always use it in conjunction with actual user research, and trying to invite real users to do accessibility testing, so you can you can have more data on how different people uses your application. So now that we talked about why it's important, what the different misconceptions are, how can we then shift accessibility to the left? And if we look at the image here, and I first saw this image from Lisa Crispin's blog. I've added the link here in case you want to read about it. But basically, this model here is just a slight variation to the DevOps and continuous testing model that people might have seen. And if I need to I guess relate accessibility here, so let's talk about if there's a new product. So if you're on the brainstorming and discovery stage, you should already be thinking about how accessibility should be embedded, and start making small recommendations on how you can incorporate accessibility earlier on. So it's also the time as well to get your project managers involved, even get like the leadership team involved. So if you don't know, I guess who to like talk to, maybe you can find a couple of people that can influence them. So this is the time to basically prioritize accessibility and start educating those who are involved, that if it's left right out at the end, then it will be time consuming and expensive. um Shifting accessibility to the left isn't just about automation. um and I want to stress this because it's like really important, because even if you have the automation like embedded, but if you're not having those conversations earlier on, and you're not trying to influence everyone, then you're not really making a lot of progress. So it's all about having those early conversations and trying to explain, or trying to get buy-ins from like different like disciplines as well. If we look at, let's say you're now on the building stage or on the design stage, you can test the design mock-ups. You can work with your UX and like design team to see if the layout is clear, if it uses high contrast, for example. If you're doing collaboration sessions as well, such as the amigo session, or refinement, um, you should also talk about accessibility requirements. So you can use things such as personas to basically derive more requirements from an accessibility point of view. So from a technical side as well, so if you're trying to, I guess, introduce accessibility like earlier on, even if the product isn't live yet, you can participate in doing code reviews. One really great way to do is, let's say, if your team has like basic HTML page, or like something that's quite similar, check if they're using the correct HTML tags, because some of the HTML tags are actually have actually been created for accessible purposes. So for example, if you're trying to create a button, just use the button tag, because sometimes I've seen other, I guess, HTML like elements where they're using divs a lot, and it's not really accessible from a screen reader perspective. So make sure that the correct HTML tags are being used. You can also, try doing pair testing with your developer, or with your tester, or just check if, let's say you're just going to use a keyboard, can you actually use the same feature as if you're using, a mouse. And of course, it's always important, to leverage the automation tools. So they provide really fast feedback, and basic issues as well can be addressed, and the whole team can be made aware as to what new accessibility issues that you might have. Then of course, so I know this talk is about shifting left, but if we also want to talk about, what happens when it's live, when it's in production, if you can like start inviting, users with disabilities to test your application. So you can observe how they're using, your product, and incorporate any feedback back to your team. Cool. So now let's look at some of the tools that you can use to help with accessibility testing. And um, I've categorized this into three different areas. So first one is tools requiring our assistance, and then you've got semi-automated tools in the form of browser extensions, and then lastly, you've got the automated tools, which you can add as part of your code base, and you can run it as part of your CI and CD pipelines. So I've already talked about this, but yeah, the first tool is really your keyboard. If your users, have low vision, again, they would use the zoom feature so they can read the contents better. So I've seen that in most cases, when you zoom in too much, it becomes really unreadable, and you can't, I guess, like interact with like the right buttons or something. There's also a lot of popular screen readers out there, but here are just some of the few. So if you're a Mac and iPhone user, voiceover is already built in, so you just need to enable it. If you're in Windows, JAWS and NVDA are the most popular ones. And if you're an Android user, there's also TalkBack, like screen readers. So you can use these tools as earlier on as possible. So if your developer is working on a feature, you can like pair with them, and like try to see how the application will behave if, for example, let's just use a screen reader. So it helps to share this knowledge, so at least it's not just you who have the knowledge on how to do like on how to do like screen reader testing, but also the rest of your team will have the knowledge as well. And then if we move on to semi-automated tools, so you've got, a lot of browser extensions to choose from. And one of the most popular ones, so you've got Axe, you've also got Wave, Google Lighthouse, and accessibility insights. So all of these extensions, it doesn't require additional technical skills. So you just need to install the extension. Google Lighthouse is already built in as well, if you're using Chrome. So all you need to do is just visit the page and then run the extension or like the Lighthouse audit, and it will basically scan the entire page for any accessibility issues. So these extensions, so if something is already in production, so this can provide a really quick feedback, so you can understand the state of the accessibility audit in terms of your own like projects. So these are like really great tools to help you get started, because most of these tools will provide suggestions already on how to fix the issue, so you can share that with your team. It also provides like the impact as well, as to like what will happen, for example, if you don't fix the issue. So it will be categorized into if it's a serious impact, if it's like a critical, and so on. And finally, so one of the most popular automated accessibility testing tool out there is Axe. So you've seen on the previous slide that Axe has a browser extension. So Axe also has a library that we can use like programmatically if we want to catch accessibility issues, depending on the testing framework that you're using. So Axe can integrate, into your testing tool of choice. So whether you're using Jest, or you're using Cypress, or like Selenium, there's an integration that you can use. There's also a CLI tool. So if you just want to run accessibility audits straight from your terminal, you can also do that. And doing it this way, it can easily integrate as well into your CI and CD pipelines. So you've seen all the benefits, the misconceptions, how we can shift to the left, and some of the example tools. So what can you do? Um, to me, it's always good to start early. So I guess if you're on a project that's still completely brand new, try to talk about, accessibility um, if you haven't started yet. So um, try to advocate for it earlier on, and get it included as part of your three amigo session, or part of your refinement session, where we should talk about accessibility requirements. You don't really have to wait for a feature to be deployed, because you can start testing for accessibility even if it's just the design mockups, or even if it's just the ticket itself. You can talk about accessibility requirements. um the main idea though is you need to get your team's involvement. So get involved with your UX team, get involved basically to your whole team, because they also need to understand that it's not just your responsibility, but it's everyone else's. And one of the main challenge that you're going to face is how to get buy-ins, because that's gonna be the toughest one. It's not the writing of the automated test, it's not doing the accessibility audit, it's actually getting the buy-ins from everyone. And if you're looking for, I guess, some extra resource on how to convince your team, there is a book that I've read by Regine Gilbert called Inclusive Design for a Digital World. And basically, in that book, she highlighted that it takes a whole village to basically create an accessible product. So it's not really just up to you. It's really up to a lot of people to try and make this work. And yeah, if you can as well, start talking to users with disabilities, so you can understand how they use your products. And it's always good to start thinking about what tools you can leverage. And what's great nowadays is there's actually so much tools now compared to the past. So start leveraging the tools that are available for you to help with your testing needs. And the good news is most of them are free. And if you haven't started early, start now. Now is always better than never. So again, start talking to your team about it. Maybe a good idea might be, if you share the slides to your team, and then make them think that, accessibility is really important. It's always a good starting point. Start making small recommendations as well. So don't just go, I guess, big bang with all your suggestions. So try to make like small recommendations. So for example, if you're trying to introduce an automated tool to catch accessibility issues, you can tailor it in a way that you'll focus first on trying to fix the critical issues, and then once you've fixed the critical issues, you'll then work on trying to fix the serious issues, the moderate issues, and then the minor issues. So at least you're not trying to fix all the issues at once. Again, if you don't know how to start testing, my main suggestion, just really use your keyboard. You'll be really surprised how many issues that it can expose. There's also an available checklist that you can use that's been recommended by the World Wide Web consortium. So there's a checklist that you can use as a start, and I've added it as a resource link, so you can have a look at it later. And start making use of available tools. Use browser extensions. Start to try to turn on the screen readers. If you're on a Mac, again, that's already included, so try to enable that, and see what happens. So see if you can still interact with the website that you're using. And yeah, it's always good to start looking at automated tools. So if you don't have capacity to integrate yet, why not ask your developers to help you integrate the tool, and explain the benefit to them. And it will also be of, I guess, a benefit to the whole team, because we can catch some regressions in terms of accessibility, and we can catch that earlier on, rather than having it reintroduced when we go live in production. And one thing to take away is, it will always take time, and that is okay. So we can't really solve all the issues at once, but what I can assure you is every small fix that you and your team introduce, it will already make it better for someone out there. So, just a couple of extra resources that you might find useful. So, the book that I'm talking about, so if you're looking for a book recommendation, it's called Inclusive Design for a Digital World. There's a resource that one of my colleague in my current workplace shared. So if you want to train people how to do accessibility reviews, I've added a link here. I've also talked about Microsoft's inclusive design, so here's the link to that again. I have a free online course as well, at Test Automation U, and it's called Test Automation for Accessibility. So if you're interested on, I guess, how to perform accessibility tests, not just on the automation side, but also on the manual and like the screen reader, I've covered that as part of this course. And this is the checklist that you can use so that you can have your first review of web accessibility. And finally, so Ministry of Testing, so they actually have this thing called 30 days of accessibility testing. And it's something that I did 2 years back, and it helped me build up my knowledge around accessibility testing. So if you're interested, in trying that challenge, then the resource is here. And yeah, that leads me to the end of my talk. So if there's any questions from anyone, I'm happy to take them now.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. That's really insightful. Quite a lot of tools. Um, we have one question. Is like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Julian. Like the point is our problem hard to automate everything. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Second question from yeah, feel free to share your thoughts about that.
Okay, so from Renata, I'll just read the question again. So, in case we want to incorporate accessibility to a project, what are the requirements that you'd recommend starting from